Aldo, I'm pleased that I'm here this year to celebrate your birthday in person. For the last few years, I've usually called Aldo on his birthday, and last year when I called him, I said, "So how does it feel?" And he said, "Well, I'm 67 and you're 47. I was actually 70 at the time. I'm delighted to be here with my wife today. I'm going to give you a kind of a personal reflection on my experience with Aldo, because I actually didn't know about Aldo Parisot, the teacher, until I was a senior in college, trying to decide where I was going to go to graduate school. And it was through Bob Vine's father. Many of you know Vine, Fushi, the late Bob Vine. I used to babysit for the Vine family, a very talented family. And the primary focus of my babysitting was not Bob, but his youngest brother, Jonathan. So when Bob went to Manus to study with Aldo, I heard nothing but rave reviews from his mother, Vine, a professional violinist and Eastman School of Music alumna, who recognized Aldo's singular gifts as a teacher. Up until then, I thought I'd go to Indiana University to study with Janos Starker, or to Harvard to study musicology. My first cello teacher from age 14, Professor Elizabeth Hodiger, had studied with Janos Starker, and she would take us over to the annual cello gatherings at IU every year. And while I enjoyed going there, it seemed a bit too big for me. My undergraduate advisor at Miami University was a Harvard-educated musicologist and suggested I consider Harvard. However, when I went to Cambridge for my interview, I was told by the person who interviewed me if I expected to practice cello, I probably wouldn't get to it until midnight. Needless to say, I scratched Harvard off my list. So in 1969, January, I was in New York to interview for a fellowship. I wrote to Aldo and asked if I might come up to New Haven to play for him. He answered affirmatively and met me at Steckel one afternoon. He arrived with his cello in a suitcase as he was on his way to perform a concerto. I think it was with the Pittsburgh Symphony. I played Dvorak, Prokofiev, and Bach for him. He made me feel incredibly comfortable right away, and there was something about him I really, really liked. He was very complimentary and told me that he would accept me as a student, and a few weeks later I received my letter. I received some fellowships that would allow me to go to any graduate school in the country, but primarily because of that one interaction with Aldo, I decided this is the place that I needed to be. Aldo's extraordinary teaching ethos was apparent to me from the start. During my first year studying with him, indeed my first few months, I was challenged in ways that have impacted my career as a professional musician. And here are just two examples. One day I showed up for my lesson to play Franck's Sonata and Chopin Introduction and Polonaise Brilliant. Before I played the note, Aldo looked at me and he told me, play every phrase with the exact opposite bowing of that which was indicated. I was completely flummoxed by this request, but I did what he was told. It was incredibly difficult, and I felt as if I were making a fool of myself. But it was a very important lesson. By changing all of the bowings, he was forcing me to think about every phrase as I played it. That is a lesson I've never forgotten, and whenever I'm relearning a piece, I always start out by considering changing the bowings and the phrasings. The next example involves the first time I played in cello class. Many of us here remember those days. I performed the Valentini Sonata in E major. I was uncontrollably nervous, which was quite a surprise to me, because while I usually had butterflies, I had never been, like shaking like wild, uncontrollably nervous. I was so embarrassed I wanted to crawl into a hole. So after the class was over, I was kind of moping around. I took my time gathering my things, and Aldo and I walked out of the room and down the steps together. As we were walking, he said to me, "You know why I was so hard on you today? Because you're good, and you need to get over those nerves." I was so relieved that I actually skipped down the steps. A lesson I learned was something I intuited from the conversation I had with him, and that was never expect not to be uncontrollably nervous. In other words, to plan to be nervous. As a teacher, Aldo inspired his students to express themselves through their music. He encouraged us to find our own unique expressive voice. And he always, always recognized when his students needed that special boost of confidence, as he did for me those many, many years ago. Later on, after Yale, I studied in Germany and learned about the word Mensch, which is used in German to denote a good and honorable person. Aldo, to me, is the epitome of a Mensch. Now, I know to some he may appear to be an unlikely candidate for this designation. After all, he can be a bit quirky and impatient, and I understand that that side of him has become even more prominent in recent years. However, for me personally, he has served as a wise mentor and trusted advisor for almost 50 years through my many directional and career changes. There was only one time when he firmly disagreed with a decision that I made, and I always checked in with him when I was making a change. And that was when I decided to take the position as the first director of the School of Music, now the Butler School of Music at the University of Texas at Austin. Aldo did not mince words when expressing his disapproval. In fact, he called me a fool and told me that he asked me if I had lost my mind. However, many years later, he admitted that I'd made the right decision. And I admitted that his approval was something I valued always. To conclude, I'm grateful that Aldo has been present at some of the most important moments of my life. He and Elizabeth took the time to come to my first inauguration as president of Wheaton College more than 16 years ago. And I have some lovely photos taken on that occasion. I am fortunate to have had Aldo, as all of us have here, as a valued teacher, mentor, advisor, and friend for almost 50 years. I am inspired to be a better teacher, mentor, advisor, and friend as a tribute to Aldo and all that he has given to all of us. In the biography, Aldo Parisot, the Cellist, The Importance of the Circle, author Susan Hawkshaw shared the following quote on why Aldo encouraged each of his students to find their own voice. He said, and I quote, "There are many people who imitate their teacher. I hate the idea that there's someone in the world who sounds like a little Aldo Parisot. You've got to be yourself. We've all got to find our own way," end of quote. Well, today, we're all little Aldo Parisots, unabashedly proud and eternally grateful to have found our own way by following yours, Aldo. On behalf of the many, many cellists whose lives you have touched over the years, thank you, and best wishes to you and Elizabeth, and happy birthday.